Greetings and salutations. So, part two of our segment um, on the NAACP boycott of the SEC and Southern football states. Um, it's continuing with a little bit of momentum, but one of the problems that they are having is that the NCAA moved the deadline for athletes to transfer schools. It used to be the deadline was closer to football season, but the deadline was pushed back, and so that deadline has passed. So what ended up happening is, might help if I have that down. I struggle with that. What happened is the NCAA they eliminated the spring window. The NAACP, it's funny that it's the NCAA versus the NAACP. Try saying that 20 times real fast, bro. Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers up on this mug. It's amazing. But the NCAA eliminated the spring window. Otherwise, the NAACP may still have a chance to make a dent, but a lot of players are not going to. Now, the one thing is the trading or the transfer window was January 2nd or January 16th. So that's obviously long gone. But the one issue that the NAACP would have in their favor is um, that a lot of players that may feel a little jilted. The one thing working against them is NIL. Obviously, I mean, if you could look at it that way. I mean, they were still paying players before NIL, but now that NIL is here, it's legalized. But there, there's still going to be some players that could say, hey, I feel like I should have a certain spot on the team. I'm not getting that spot. I could go without the bag, or they may already have a bag, or they may already have a source of income. They can choose to boycott. So it's going to be sort of interesting to see what's going on. But I've said it before, I say it again. The NCAA is years late in doing this, bro. They could have been had this done. They could have been had this done. But let's see what Roland's got to say. This is Roland's second segment on this particular topic. I disagree with Roland. I've said it before. I've disagreed with Roland on a lot of things. He is a Democratic hack, but we don't disagree on everything. Um, so uh, it is interesting some of the things that he has to say with this second segment concerning this particular topic. So let's get into it.
Folks, let's talk about the NAACP's call when it comes to athletes and protesting, not going to these predominantly white institutions. Now, it's been really interesting. And been in chat groups and people have been texting me. They're like, oh, I don't understand what the NAACP is doing. This is not a good idea. I mean, why are we getting in the way of these young men securing the bag and on and on and on?
So again, uh, uh, nobody's telling them not to play ball. They're just telling them the schools to avoid. That's all they're telling them. Doesn't have to be the SEC, bro. They can go out to the schools in Cali. They can go out to the schools in Illinois. They can go to the schools in Michigan. They're just trying to get them to go to schools in blue states where your vote counts for something. Even for the ones that don't vote, people that look like them do vote, and their vote no longer counts in these red states. Now, this week, um, state Supreme Court, I think a federal judge stopped the redistricting that was going on in one state. When one state, a federal judge stopped it, but then in another state, a state Supreme Court stopped it. So, recent Republican led redistricting efforts in Alabama and South Carolina were halted following a twin set of judicial and legislative setbacks aimed at protecting existing minority majority congressional districts. So, a three-judge federal panel blocked a Republican backed map in Alabama, and then the South Carolina State Senate adjourned its special redistricting session without passing a new map. So, I stand corrected. But it was a couple of minor setbacks, but both of those states are going to go directly to the Supreme Court, bro. They're going to take both of those cases directly to the Supreme Court. Chances are, would be willing to bet a dollar to a dime. The Supreme Court is going to side with the governors in both cases, and it's going to be right back to square one for a lot of people.
Was the most insane thing I read, where this one black journalist goes, "Well, why are we asking these young people to do this? As if we don't have a history of young black people."
Texas and Alabama, to me, and Florida, and really Georgia too, are the most important states in this. Georgia, because ever since Donald John, the pedophile con, called down there and and told him he needed a few more votes and then recorded it. Like he wants people to know what he's about, bro. They're just fighting a very different fight than Democrats are fighting. It's amazing. And they count on Democrats being soft like marshmallows. But at the end of the day, um, Georgia is important because ever since Donald John made that call down there, it put the state on blast. It put the whole state on blast. They've been on blast ever since. And since then they've sent federal agents down there to confiscate voting documents and voter rolls. It's been a hot mess ever since that phone call. Alabama has always been just a disgusting. I have no clue why black athletes, and of course, obviously, you know, there's a reason why they go down there, but the state is just steeped in racism and fascism. Black folks swinging from trees. It's steeped in it. It's steeped in it. But they can get all these athletes to go down there and play ball. It's amazing, bro. Texas, the wheelchair Nazi running around controlling the state. And they got their districts gerrymandered and they got their districts redistricted. They got all that done down there. So that's an important state because they have a football is king in that state. Football is king in all these states. Football is king in Florida. Football is king in Georgia, Alabama, and Texas. Football is king. Louisiana too, but uh, and Louisiana is important because of some of the comments that the governor made after the recent mall shooting. In which he said, "Lock them all up." The guy's governor, he has no solutions. But so these are just important states. But if we can get our kids to withdraw from playing sports in these states, it'll make a difference, bro. And they're not asking them to not play ball or to miss out on the bag. They're just asking them to find a blue state where they care about your vote. That's all they're asking them.
Being involved for fighting for rights of black people. Like, I don't understand what in the hell she was reading. Howard Bryant, sports journalist, author of numerous books. Henry Aaron on black athletes protesting. Of course, Ricky Henderson, latest book on Paul Robeson and Jackie Robinson. Yes, it's in my backpack.
Now, this old boy, like, I didn't know what I was looking at when I first saw him. I'm like, we're moving towards a period of time where how we look in front of a camera means something. And I'm sure this is a great individual. I'm sure this is a great person. Obviously, this individual cares about our community and all that. But this person looked like he ought to be on NBC with all them other alphabet people. And that's a fact, bro. Like, people can say what they want, but I'm just, we need to, as a group of as black people, we need to take like we need to start taking into account the visual side, how we look. PBS loved to shove that one brother in front of the camera, and that brother sweet as cake. They love making us look a certain way, bro. It's a visual war. We are fighting a visual war. And it's very difficult to get messaging across when you got people that look a certain way. I'm trying to figure out why this brother got on a t-shirt, bro. You're on Roland Martin with a t-shirt on. Now I'm trying to figure it out, bro. But regardless, um, uh, it's time for us to take people in the black community that the Lord blessed with a look for TV. The Lord blessed them with certain attributes. Those are the people that need to be up front. It's where the messaging war turns visual. We're in a visual war. You better know the type of war you're fighting.
Joins me right now. So, Howard, just just give us just your just overall view of this NAACP call, because it's not just about the athletes. It's saying to alumni and others, don't support, don't watch, don't buy product, don't give money. It's a detailed plan, but listen to some of these people. You swear it's like, oh my God, they're saying these black kids shouldn't get education, as if your top athlete, like if you're being recruited by Alabama or Texas A&M or South Carolina or Florida, not like the Big Ten ain't trying to recruit you to.
Yeah, that's right. It's really interesting. I think that one of the things that kind of struck me that was happening is that I think people have forgotten the totality of the fight. I think that the argument that, oh well, you're not supposed to have these young students or you're asking too much of them. One, it's a historical, as you said, but also I think it's something else, and that is, I think that there has been such an overestimation of money. That this idea that these kids are, let them secure their bag, let them get their money, and there's nothing that can stand in the way of that. And I think that what that does is it doesn't pay any attention to, one, the historical struggle or the present one. Those, most of those kids have a lot of leverage. They're not kids. They are incredibly powerful members of of a 10 to 12 billion, or if you add in the NFL, a $30 billion industry, and they have power. And all the questions that we have been, whenever you're trying to do any sort of political strategizing, where's the leverage and how can you use it? So
So there's a 6 year metric. Studies tracking specifically black male student athletes in high profile sports like football and basketball across the Power Five conferences indicated 55.2% graduation rate within a 6 year window, underscoring the ongoing challenge of closing the academic gap in revenue sports. So when they say Power Five, they're talking SEC, Big Ten, they're talking Big 12, they're talking the other two, and that's the Pac 12 and the ACC. So you're talking a 52% graduation rate, bro. You know, they just, these brothers ain't even graduating, bro. Half of them don't graduate.
I thought that it was fascinating that I think that I think we're rusty. That's what I think. I think that people are also not paying anywhere near close enough attention to the state that we're in. And I just think that it was a very interesting reaction to something that I didn't think was controversial at all.
Also, think, Howard, we are in a period where it's
Yeah.
really about self. It's about you, self and I. Get yours. And how dare you ask of them? I mean, I've heard people say, well, why isn't the NAACP telling professional athletes? Well, first of all, professional athletes, those are not state schools. We're talking here about state legislators, governors who are making decisions, and the schools, Texas, Texas A&M, Alabama, Auburn, Florida, Florida State, South Carolina, Georgia, University of Tennessee. These are all state schools. There's a reason why they're targeting state schools. Clemson.
Well, 100%, and that's also, which is an ACC school, and so I don't think the NAACP went far enough. I think where there are a couple of areas here where I think is worthy of discussion. One is always going to be tactics. I think this sort of came out of the blue for a lot of people, and I think I'm not sure. I'm doing some reporting on it right now, but I just don't think that there was enough scaffolding. You want, when you, as the great Dr. Harry Edwards would say, that's his phrase that I have borrowed over and over again. You do need scaffolding to create your movement. You need people to understand what it's about and why.
This brother looked like he got on eyeliner, bro, and that's a fact.
You also need your test cases. You need to find the number of people who are willing to go forward with you. And so I think that, the one criticism that I think was valid was this sort of got sprung upon everybody instead of really being meticulous in the movement building. And so I think taking people by surprise is a little difficult there. I think the other thing, too, is you're right. Your initial point was we live in a time of complete nihilism. I think people have quit. I think one of the great journalists, Naomi Klein, talks about disaster capitalism and how people, especially the oligarchies in this world and in this country, have given up on everybody and given up on the world. And I think that there's a lot of people who have bought into that. And so I'm just going to get mine and do my thing, and that is my definition of success. But that is also not something new. That's something.
So I don't think it's necessarily people giving up as much as it's a lot of these kids don't have a clue of who we are and where we come from, bro. And you can see that by how they act in the streets. The only difference between the athlete and the street kid is that one of them can play ball and the other one can't spell the word play. One of them can play ball, the other one couldn't play a fiddle. One of them can play ball and the other one getting played. That's the only difference, bro. Besides the fact that once we figure out a kid can punt, pass, kick, can shoot a basketball and can hit a baseball, we start coddling them. When really we need to coddle all of our young black youth. That is a major difference. But other than that, we can't expect. This is going to be a difficult challenge, and one of the major reasons why is because we cannot expect our young black athletes to just all of a sudden be able to call upon years and years of black history to understand how far we've come, where we're going, why we are where we are right now.
That has been building past 50 years, this idea that there is no community, this idea that we don't owe anything to each other and that we're not in a common struggle. The argument has been that, oh, well, this is just a desperate attempt by the NAACP and by Democrats to show some level of fight. And I think that the issue here is that this is not about politics. This is about what is happening to black people in this country right now. Everybody, it's an all hands on deck thing. And I feel like one of the real difficulties in these conversations have been these sort of straw arguments that athletes, that these teenagers are being asked all by themselves to carry a movement, and they're not. They're just an extremely important economic piece of it. And we also know, too, that if there is one thing we know, it's that economic boycotts work. They are effective. And if you are going to take something of value and affect it, people pay attention. And nothing is more important to those regions than college football.
Yep.
You are getting their attention, which is exactly what a movement's supposed to do. It's like when the players were kneeling. It's like, well, what are you kneeling here for? Because this is where people are paying attention. So you
Right.
do need, you what I would like to see more of, and I think you're going to have to see it for this to just not be a blip of a news story, is real organizing and real articulation, not just to the athletes but to the parents.
Yep.
And the argument that people are going to say, well, why are you taking this money from these kids? Well, you're not. If there's money in Alabama, there's money at Oregon. There's money in Wisconsin. There's money in Michigan.
Yeah.
If you're a top 20, top 30, top 40 recruit, you're not going to lose anything. You might actually gain more.
Absolutely. This is the whole thing is called the NAACP calls it out of bounds college athletics. They have a whole toolkit. Come on, go to my iPad. Let's go. So you got it right here. See it right here, and it lays out the schools. It lays out the demands with the.
One thing about Roland, the boy sweet as cake. But one thing about Roland is he screams at his staff, and it's hilarious. It's hilarious. His expectation is within 1 to 2, like a second. Like if you aren't reacting in about 1 second, 1 to 1.5 seconds, he's on you. He on your top, bro. Like the guy is freaking hilarious.
Campaign is, and the calls about getting involved. And I think you're right. You're absolutely right. The groundwork was not laid, and that should have happened. There were critical people. I know there were conversations that took place because, but it was because I was on one of the calls. But it should have been far more expansive, and it should have been. And I think part of this whole thing was you had this week that took place where it went from an idea to planning the day of action in Montgomery, and it was like, well, let's drop ours soon after. But you need to actually build this whole thing up. So you're absolutely right about that. I'm sitting here wearing this shirt. They gave it to me when I was in Montgomery, and good trouble. And that was, of course, the great comment from Congressman John Lewis. John Lewis was 19. John Lewis was 19 years old, okay,
That's
when he
right.
was getting his head bashed in. This week, you also had the Freedom Riders. You had the Freedom Riders, and you have these Freedom Riders who were college students who were
That's
going
right.
down Mississippi and Alabama. You had SNCC, you had CORE. We could go on and on and on. So this notion that young people were involved is crazy. But we don't have to go back far. Go to my iPad. Kylan Hill, running back, Mississippi State. That young man said, I'm not playing under that flag.
Now, the one thing about Mississippi, it's a deeply, deeply racist state. And several, in fact, hordes of athletes that played at Ole Miss say that when you come out of the tunnel, you can hear the N word, like they asking for popcorn, peanuts, and Coca Cola. And that's a fact, bro. Uh, and so it's no different at Mississippi State. I don't know why no kid would go there except for a lot of money. Um, so Lane Kiffin got the LSU job last year. This is his first year with the team, and even Lane Kiffin said that he has when he was recruiting at Ole Miss, he would have a lot of kids tell him that their parents and grandparents didn't want them to go there because of just the history in the state. So in October 2015, the university officially lowered and removed the Mississippi state flag, which had the Confederate battle emblem. That was just 2015. That was just 10 years ago. In 2010, the school retired the Colonel Reb mascot, which is the imagery of antebellum plantation owner. That was just 2010. In 2020, they relocated a Confederate statue from the heart of the campus to a cemetery. And if Donald John, the pedophile con, finds out, he will have it moved right back to the heart of campus, because in his world, this is who we are, and in my world, this is who we are. It is who we are. It's a country built off of slavery. People need to realize that. To me, moving those statues, and look, I could care less either way, because moving a statue don't make people less less racist. It doesn't remove what happened to us. It doesn't remove what this country is about. But it's just the fact that either way, that statue can be viewed different ways. It can be used as a reminder to people. It can be used as a tool for kids not to go there, for athletes not to enroll there, for people to not accept scholarships to go there. But it can also be used as a tool for a white father can look at his kids and he can point that statue and say, "This is what we're about. Make sure you keep your knee on their neck at all times." So it's either way, bro. To me,
He tweeted that, Howard. It was like June 20th of 2020. 10 days later. Okay,
Yeah,
let me help people out. 10 days later, Tate Reeves, the governor of Mississippi, signed into law that Confederate emblem off that flag. Why? Because when Kylan Hill, one black player, tweeted that, other black players spoke up, then white coaches went, oh shit, we're not going to be able to get black ball players. And those white coaches and some of those black athletes went to the state capitol and they met with violent, racist Republican legislators, people who celebrate Jefferson Davis's birthday in Mississippi, and they said, hey man, y'all need to get rid of this emblem or we in trouble. 10 days. But let me help the people who are watching and listening. What y'all don't know is the NAACP, for a very long time, had organized a boycott of Mississippi. The NAACP stopped Mississippi and South Carolina from being able to hold any NCAA type tournament because of that Confederate flag. That had been going on 2 or 3 decades. I remember we covered a protest here in D.C. When actress Anjanou Ellis was involved with the protest of the boycott against that flag. So they had been boycotting that flag for decades, Howard. When one black football player tweeted that, it took 10 days to bring them to their knees. I'm trying to understand why folk act like that never happened.
You know, and I understand it in some ways, Roland, because we've been taught over and over again, or not taught necessarily, told that there is no more racism and that there is nothing to fight about and that there is nothing to protect. We're also being told that at a time when things are actively being taken from us. And when I say things being taken from us, I'm talking about your simple dignity of having a job and being told that your job is simply the byproduct, that you were given something through DEI or some other nonsense, that you were somehow the beneficiary of something free, when we know that we have to work extremely hard to do anything. And so I think that you're looking at a group of people in some senses who need to sharpen the edges. And I'm talking about us. The edges need to resharpen. And also, I think that the one area where you do have this, and Muhammad Ali was what, 20, 21? So, I mean, all of the things. When the thing about black people in sports, and you and I have been talking about this for years, is that we're 12.5% of the national population, but we're not 12% of the culture. And so when you take some of the areas where we are,
So, black athletes, although we make up 12% of the population, will make up 40 to 47% of all participants in NCAA Division I football. So, and there's other disparities like that. I can look up basketball, you know, I can look up track. There's other disparities like that. I can classify it by non-whites. Then I guarantee the disparities get even bigger, get even higher.
at our strongest, where that leverage really is, sports is at the top of it.
Yep.
And people will respond to it. And you have to have something that people care about to get their attention. And if you can't handle that, then you're not about it. But you need to be about it. And those kids, those athletes who, have an opportunity to do so many things, they're going to be adults and parents, and they have parents and they have grandparents. So it's not just about you. And the other thing too is, if you have that sort of leverage, if you are a LeBron James, or if you're some top 10 recruit who has, it's not just about you. And the other thing too is, if you have that sort of leverage, if you are a LeBron James, or if you're some top 10 recruit who has a chance to go to Alabama, or has a chance to go to Clemson, or a chance to go to South Carolina, or whatever, right? I mean, the level of power that you have is supposed to, or the level of money you're going to have, is supposed to also translate into power. What good is the money if you have no agency? We talk about athlete activism and all of these things, but what good is any of it if you lose everything? This is the time, and also from an athletic standpoint, as Black citizens, a lot of these athletes are never going to have more political power and more political leverage than they have right now. So if you say, "Oh, well, we shouldn't do this for these," we shouldn't let them carry it, they'll never be in a better position to carry it than right now.
Like it is astonishing. It is astonishing to me when we talk about this. And again, people act as if math didn't exist. They act as if we don't recall facts. We don't recall what happened. I mean, listen, we all know, and I've had the pleasure of meeting both of them when Tommy Smith and John Carlos in Mexico
Mm-hmm.
City, 1968, stood on that podium, shoes off, black power fists raised with black gloves on. Let me just remind people, they were 22 and 23 years old.
That's right.
So I'm just trying to like we can literally walk. You just said Kareem Abdul-Jabbar.
So, and I illustrate this earlier, but this is sort of the problem that we're having is that these kids are removed, we're what, 60 years, 70 years removed from segregation and from Jim Crow. So, these kids don't, when you talk about Kareem and them, those were the times when they were still sicking dogs on little black kids trying to protest and still turning fire hoses on little black girls trying to protest for equal rights. So it's real easy for, a lot of young black kids then didn't feel like they had a choice but to protest. And honestly, we should have kept building on our own, but a lot of black folks didn't feel black folks was fooled into thinking they didn't have a choice but to protest. But regardless, when they did protest for equal rights, little black girls got dog sicked on them. Little black boys got fire hose turned on them, and it was real easy for athletes to take a more rebellious stand against the system back then. The days we living in now, bro, it's just different times, bro. We're gonna have to rouse the troops. That's our biggest challenge to me, and our greatest opportunity lies with the fact that we need to rouse the troops, bro. And a lot of it's gonna have to come with us educating these kids as to what's really going on around them and what it means when your vote doesn't count. But I get back again to blaming Democrats for the last 4 years. They did nothing. It's real easy for these kids to look and say, why y'all want me to boycott something when when Joe Biden was in office, they did absolutely nothing. And that's going to be our biggest challenge. And look, for me personally, I'm an independent voter. I could care less about Democrats. Um, and I sure wouldn't vote for a conservative. But, I still want us to pool more of our money, assets, and resources with our HBCUs and in our communities instead of taking which really amounts to a couple of drops. I don't care how much they pay these athletes on the stupid NIL. It's still a droplet in it. It's a droplet. It's not even a drop. It's a droplet in the bucket compared to what they make those schools. Our kids, at a minimum, need to play in states that care about their vote. And furthermore, and even more than that, our kids need to we need to get as many of our 5 stars into HBCUs as humanly possible. Those TV contracts need to be going to HBCUs. Those are our kids running them touchdowns or getting concussions, bro. Them HBCUs, they get the absolute worst freaking bottom of the barrel talent. It's time for that to end, bro. That's all I really care about. I could care less about Democrats, but I see the out of bounds platform and the effort that goes along with that as an opportunity to get our kids, our best kids, out of these freaking white schools, bro. Especially the ones in the South. Even if they do decide, well, I'm not going to play for HBCU, but they'll go to Oregon. To me, it's getting us a little bit of a step closer. It's getting a little bit because a kid can withdraw from Alabama and go play for Oregon, but then the entire political system in Oregon could change rapidly. Now they back not now they at square one in Oregon. So we honestly need to be pushing these kids to HBCUs. But I feel like at a minimum, if we can get them out of a lot of these southern states and away from these southern schools, to me that's a big first step, bro.
Refuse to represent the United States in that Olympic Games.
And he was
Um,
21.
Again, you go before that. To your point, Ali, how what his age was. We can just walk through this stuff, and I'm just sitting there going, I've seen even some activists and radio hosts and journalists, and I'm going, do any of y'all read?
Well, I think people don't feel like there is a need to sacrifice anything. Like I said, we're in a nihilistic time. And not only are we in a nihilistic time,
So the media, for the most part, is taking a hands-off approach. You've heard the Out of Bounds platform being mentioned sort of sparsely. I saw NBC cover it once. Basically, the major media outlets are sort of, they might do a 45-second segment on it, maybe a couple of minutes. Fox did a segment, but it was a segment against it. But they're sort of not doing like a mass media coverage of it because all that's going to do is pump it up and really get the word out. So it's sort of, you know, pins and needles, needles and pins, sort of kid gloves right now. You can just tell there's a big section of the media that they don't even want to talk about it because all they doing is getting the word out. Because I guarantee you, there's still a lot of athletes don't even know that there's an out of bounds platform. So, um, Brian Flores has a lawsuit against the NFL. So when you talk about the NFL, you're talking about old white money. When you talk about old white money, you're talking about families, and in most cases, you're talking about families that own slaves, bro, and that's a fact. A lot of white NFL owners come from old money. That means that their families at some point owned slaves, and so that's one of the reasons why you see, they had to come up with the Rooney Rule, where they had to interview so many black head coaching candidates before they chose a white one. Like, it didn't even force them really to choose a black head coach. And me personally, I'm not necessarily for forcing white folks to do the right thing, because they just gonna move around that anyway. And it looks like we got our hand out begging for something. But and look, I don't care that they're getting sued. I think it's funny that the Supreme Court picks and chooses whose head they want to knock off from one day to the next. But so Brian Flores has just below a 500 record as head coach of the Dolphins. He's not a great coach, bro. He's not. They moved to fire him, which they would have done. Now, don't get me wrong. They give a lot of black coaches a lot of sorry coaching jobs, but it is up to you to make the best of it. And if you can get a team to close to a 700, 750 record during your tenure there, then you can go on to a good organization that goes out and gets free agents. The Miami Dolphins don't really do that, bro. They don't really, a few years ago they had all that offense averaging all them points every game with Tua in them, and they had no defense to stop anybody. Most years they have a pretty decent defense, but then the offense will suck. Like, they don't go out and get what they need when they need it, how they need it to get themselves into a playoff system when the team's decent enough. Like, they're just not. The Dolphins are like the Cubs, bro. They have a cult following. They can lose every game and make a ton of money. Salute. But at the end of the day, they give black coaches um, the small to mid market organizations. Like, they give them organizations that aren't committed to winning, and you got to work your way into, where you can coach a team like the Cowboys, or maybe which I can't really put the Giants in there, because I've seen the Giants get rid of so many players. It used to be at one point the team with the most ex Giants ended up in the Super Bowl. At what point? That's how bad it was with the Giants hemorrhaging talent and just getting rid of talented players. Um, but I don't necessarily consider Brian Flores necessarily a great coach by any stretch of the imagination. Um, but I still like watching NFL owners get sued, especially by a Supreme Court they helped put together, because most, if not all of them, are conservatives, which means they support Mitch McConnell. He's the reason why the court is so right winged as it is right now. But their own right wing Supreme Court sided against them. So, I don't mind watching them get sued, but black coaches get the worst jobs, bro. They get the worst jobs if they get a job at all. So, I like seeing that discrimination lawsuit go forward, but Brian Flores, dog, is not. He's not the best coach, bro. He's a pretty good assistant, but he's not. necessarily the best head coach, bro. And look, there's some white coaches that go to lesser teams that end up with a very similar record to what he had. That's really what his lawsuit is about. Is that there's white coaches that go to similar teams that are just flat out not committed to winning. Um, they end up with around 500 records. Some of them less than 500 records, and they still get other jobs. There's white coaches that get jobs they should not have. There's white coaches ain't never. There's white coaches get jobs they never should have had. That's why coaches never hardly won a day in their life getting head NFL coaching positions with good teams. That's really what this lawsuit is about. People love to rest their laurels, like white racists and the snowflake fascists. They love to rest their laurels on saying that on just DEI this and DEI that. As soon as they see a black person at a cash register, they think it's DEI. And DEI was never a law, bro. It was never a law. It's just a set of corporate and organizational values, workplace practices, and training programs. It was never a law. Nobody ever forced any of those organizations to hire anybody darker than a snowflake. And mostly it helped white women. That was the biggest group that got opportunity out of it. And that got anything out of it was white women. But DEI was just never what people try to say it is, bro. And I'm gonna go ahead and stop the video here. It's not necessarily my best upload, but I'm trying to get better at it. But just people, that is one thing I would love for people to take from this video is that DEI was never a law. The Rooney Rule is just to get black coaching candidates in the door to speak to people that maybe they can convince somebody. Does not force white owners to hire anybody in particular. Same thing with DEI. DEI is just it's a set of practices. That's it. White people love to point the finger and say they're forcing us to do this, that, and the other, and nothing could be further from the truth. So, man, I appreciate y'all. Please, you're encouraged, and it is suggested to like, share, subscribe. Please type the video, and I'm trying to get better at this. So I'm going to put forth a little bit more better effort with the next video. But I appreciate y'all regardless. Peace in the Middle East and to my dead homies.